Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we are taking a look at the characters from the Legend of Korra. Now, of course, as some of you know, Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite show of all time. And well, of course, Legend of Korra was never really going to live up to the hype of the first show. I still think this is a really great show. Some seasons definitely better than others. My favorites are season 1 and 3. But I really did enjoy all of them, and so I'm excited to do this list. So, starting us off, we have Korra, of course, the main character. And like I would say most main characters in most shows, it's really hard to dislike her. It's really cool to see her development, even just within seasons, but especially across multiple seasons. I think she's a really good main character. I wish we got to know a little bit more of her backstory before kind of the first episode of season 1. But definitely a cool character overall, and as the Avatar, it's hard to put her anything less than S tier, so she'll find herself up there. Up next, we have Naga, the polar bear dog. This is the animal companion for Korra, and I love dogs. I like polar bears. Polar bear dog, it's a good combo, and I mean, look at Naga in that picture. Just looks so cute. I would love to have a polar bear dog if I could myself. But honestly, as far as animals go, it's hard for me to put them really high up in the tiers because, of course, they don't really talk unless you're talking about, Momo hallucinations, maybe. But overall, I still think that it's a really good animal companion. Naga looks cool, plays an important role, so we'll still find himself in a solid A tier. Up next, we have Tanrak. This is Korra's father, and I would say he plays a decently important role in a couple of the seasons, but really he's not a super consequential character. I would say season 2 is probably the most important role that he plays. And overall, I think he's a pretty cool character, definitely interesting. I wish we got to know a little bit more into his background. We do learn a decent amount in season 2, but overall, a solid character, doesn't really blow me away. He'll find himself in kind of a low B tier. Up next, we have Mako and Bolin. Now, I really like these characters. Mako especially definitely plays a very important role in Season 1, and I would say even maybe Season 2. But I think in Season 3 and 4, his importance as a character kind of falls off a little bit. So in Season 1, I would say he's a very solid A tier as a character, but in Season 3 and 4, he kind of finds himself down in the C tier. So Mako overall will find himself in a B tier. Still think he's really cool, can lightning bend. A good fighter, cool character, but just gonna find himself in the B tier. And Bolin kind of the same way, definitely important in season 1 and even season 2. I love Bolin's acting career. It's one of my favorite side plots for Bolin. Absolutely hilarious, and honestly, he would find himself in the B tier, but just because of his acting career, that's gonna be enough to bump him up into the A tier. Up next, we have Pabu. This is Bolin's spirit animal, I suppose you could say. Animal companion, that is, and I think Pabu is pretty funny, but he is a rather inconsequential character. I think like once or twice he chews through some rope when Bolin is tied up or something, but overall, he's not really that important. He's cute, but honestly, we got Naga there, and I prefer Naga over Pabu, so Pabu gonna find himself down in the B tier. Up next, we have Asami, who, similarly to Mako and Bolin, I think her importance is definitely highlighted in season 1 and 2. She still is important in the later seasons, but definitely to a lesser extent. But overall, I think she's a really cool and interesting character. I've always liked people who are non-benders but still good at fighting, and she's definitely a good fighter even without bending. So Asami gonna find herself in a solid B tier. Up next, we have Hiroshi Sato, the creator of the Satomobiles. And honestly, I think he's a really interesting character. I had kind of a sneaking suspicion that he was a little more important than they let on at the beginning of season 1. I really did not expect him to be the bad guy right away, but I think overall he had a really cool character. I liked him as a villain. I thought he played his role well. I thought his logic as a villain made sense, and we even get to see him redeem his character a little bit in the later seasons when he reconnects with Asami. So overall, I just think he's a really cool character, plays a really good villain, and gonna find himself up in the A tier. Up next, we have Mayor Raiko, I believe. Governor Raiko, I'm not sure which one it is, I can't remember. But basically, this guy is in charge of Republic City, and honestly, I think he's kind of a boring, bland character. Very cookie cutter. I feel like they pretty much just took really bland features of a politician and then made it into this character. He doesn't have anything very interesting about him, doesn't have any like really cool or interesting decisions that he makes. Overall, just kind of a boring and, basically an obstacle for Korra. But I don't feel that he adds a whole lot of value to the show, so Governor Raiko gonna find himself down in the D tier, sorry. Up next, we have Lin Beifong. This is Toph's daughter, and honestly, pretty much what I expected if Toph had a daughter. And I think Lin is a great character, really cool. You can tell that she struggles a lot with kind of the scars of her past, and you really see those, especially in season 4 and 3 as well. But I think Lin is a really cool character. I feel like she adds a lot of value to the show. And metal bending is always cool in my book, so she's going to find herself up in the A tier. Up next, we have Tenzin. This is one of Aang's children, and of course the only airbender of the family until later seasons when Bumi becomes an airbender. Spoilers if you haven't seen it already. But I think Tenzin is a pretty good character. He's a bit bland in early season 1, I would say, but one thing I love about Tenzin is we get to see him fight with airbending a lot, and that's something we never really saw in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Aang would use it sometimes, but I feel like he used airbending mostly as like to evade and run away. We never really saw him use it offensively, and Tenzin, we really do see him use it offensively, especially in season 3 when he is fighting with airbending. He makes it look really cool. I think Tenzin is a great character. I didn't love him in season 1, but pretty much every season after that, I think his character just gets better and better and better. So Tenzin, also going to find himself up in the S tier. Up next, we have Oogie, who is Tenzin's flying bison. Now, I'll be honest, I was a little bit disappointed with this one, with how much I loved Appa. I thought I was going to love Oogie, but honestly, they just didn't really spend time on him, and I don't blame, the writers for not spending much time on Oogie, but we just never really see anything about him. We don't really see much of his personality. He's just kind of there. He's a mode of transportation, but, unlike Naga and even Pabu, we don't really get to see the personality of Oogie much, so I hate to do this to a flying bison, but he's going to find himself in the D tier. He just doesn't really, add much to the show, in my opinion. Up next, we have Pema. Now, this is Tenzin's wife, and of course, the mother to their children. And overall, as a character, I don't really feel like she plays much of an important role. She doesn't really make any critical decisions, or she's not funny. She's not, like, a good fighter, so overall, I think she's kind of a bland character, and, they didn't really spend much time on her, of course, but Pema really just doesn't add a whole lot of value to the show. She's just kind of there because this family, well, it needs a mother in order to bear the children. So Pema, unfortunately, gonna find herself in the F tier. I don't really dislike her, but I just don't feel she adds any value to the show, really whatsoever. So unfortunately, she'll find herself down there. Up next, we have Ikki, who is the second oldest child of the Tenzin family. And overall, I think she's kind of interesting. She's kind of the cliche, super talkative, super hyper, super energetic child of the family. Although you could say the same about Milo as well. But Ikki, of the 3 children, I feel like she has the least amount of character development throughout the show. I think she's fine, but overall, only going to find herself in the C tier. Up next, we have Jinora, who I think is a really cool character. We really see a lot of character development for Jinora from Season 1 to Season 4, something I did not really expect at the beginning. But I think she's a great character, when she becomes an airbending master. I think that's a really cool point in the show. And of course, her being able to kind of guide Korra through the spirit realm, I thought was a really good addition to the show as well. So, Jinora gonna find herself up in the A tier. Up next, we have Milo, who is my favorite character of this family. He is just so funny. Honestly, at the beginning of Season 1, I thought he was kind of just annoying. But as the seasons went on, I began to love him more and more. And he's just so funny. Great jokes, great comedy relief. A great fighter as well. Especially when he trains like all of the flying lemurs in the later seasons. Absolutely hilarious. Milo gotta find himself up in the S tier, and it's not even close. Up next, we have Bumi, Bumi from Avatar: The Last Airbender was my favorite character in that show. And I do really like Bumi in this show as well. He's another one of Aang's children. But overall, I would say he doesn't wow me quite like Bumi did in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Still a funny character, still pretty goofy, and the stories he tells I think are really good. But again, I'm always comparing him to the other Bumi, so he's not going to quite hit that mark, but he will still find himself in a solid A tier. Up next, we have Kaya, another one of Aang and Katara's children. And overall, I think Kaya is an interesting character. She's a pretty cool waterbender, clearly like pretty intelligent, pretty smart. But we don't really see a whole lot of her character outside of that. I wish we got to know a little bit more about her. We don't really see a whole lot into her life, and so because she just doesn't reveal much in the show, she can really only find herself in the B tier for me. Up next, we have General Iroh, not the one from Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is, I believe, Zuko's grandson, and I think he is a pretty cool character. You know, we really don't see him too much outside of Season 1. In fact, I can't really recall seeing him after Season 1, but he does play a decent role in the Season 1 Battle for Republic City. And in there, I think he's a pretty cool character, but overall, I don't feel like adds too much value, so he's only going to find himself in the C tier. Up next, we have Amon. Of course, this is the villain from Season 1, and in my opinion, he is the coolest villain of all the seasons. I don't just mean in his abilities, I just mean in his logic, you know, in the way that he operates. I just think he does a really good job of playing the bad guy, and I feel that in terms of a villain, I think the mystery surrounding him, I think the value he adds to the show is just the best out of all these villains, and so Amon gonna find himself up in the A tier for me. Up next, we have Tarlok. Now, this is, of course, Amon's brother, but this guy is, you know, not known to be his brother, and they're both the sons of, I believe it's Yakone, who is the Bloodbender, and so Tarlok is also a Bloodbender. Him also, I think he plays a really good job of being a bad guy as well. Not quite as good as Amon, but I do think that he's really cool, and honestly, at the beginning, I did not expect him to be the bad guy. You know, I thought he was going to be kind of one of those neutral villains who's just an obstacle for Korra, but I really did not expect him to be the character he became, and overall, I thought he was a really good character as well, and gonna find himself up in the A tier. Up next, we have, I think, Desna and Esna. I'm not sure which one is which, honestly. I haven't seen the show in several months, so I'm having a hard time remembering which one is which, but I know one of them gets absolutely obsessed with Bolin and, you know, wants to bear his children very badly. But overall, I would say they're interesting characters, but not really my favorite. They add some value in Season 2, but outside of that, they don't really do a whole lot, so they're each going to find themselves in the C tier, because I don't really feel like I can separate them, because I'm not sure which one is which. Up next, we have Varrick, and I absolutely love Varrick. He is, by far, my favorite character in this show. I really love Milo, but Varrick for me is just on a whole nother level. I mean, he is easily the best comedy relief character in the Avatar universe, even better than any character in terms of comedy relief from Avatar: The Last Airbender as well. Like, every time he's on screen, he's saying something funny. Varrick gotta be up in the S tier for me. I love his inventions and his jokes. Really great character. And then up next, we have Zhu Li, who is his assistant, of course. And honestly, what would Varrick be without Zhu Li? I think she's a great character as well. And we really see a lot of character development for her specifically in Season 4 because, you know, in Season 2 and 3, she's just kind of there to assist Varrick. But Season 4, you know, she really takes on her own character, which I think is pretty cool. So she'll find herself in a solid A tier. Up next, we have Unalaq, who is the villain from Season 2. And he's another one where I think kind of his objective as a villain is relatively creative. You know, wanting to become the Dark Avatar and bind with, I'm drawing a blank on the Dark Spirit's name, but I think it's pretty cool. I didn't really love Season 2 overall, but I did think that Unalaq was a pretty good villain. I thought he added good value. He was an interesting character. Once again, I would say I saw him being the villain from pretty early on, but still a good character nonetheless, and he'll find himself in a very solid B tier. Up next, we have Su Yin, who is the sister of Lin Beifong, another one of Toph's daughters. And I would say she's pretty cool. As a character, I didn't like her that much, but I did think that the city she was in, where it was all metal benders and like everything was made out of metal, I thought that was a really cool concept for a city. And while I didn't love her as a character, I thought the situations surrounding her were pretty good. And I thought she added a little bit of value in Season 4 as well, so it'll be enough to find herself in the B tier. Up next, we have the Earth Queen. Honestly, kind of funny. Not at all what I expected when I thought of the Earth Queen, but I think she is a pretty funny character. I don't really feel she adds too much value to the show, and she actually gets, you know, killed off relatively early in Season 3, which is kind of surprising because I did not expect to actually, you know, see somebody die in the Avatar universe so clearly. But, you know, at the end of Season 1, we saw, you know, the boat blow up with both the villains on it. You know, in Season 3, we see the Earth Queen get suffocated by the main villain. So, definitely interesting, but as far as the Earth Queen herself, I think she's funny, but doesn't really add too much value, so she'll only find herself in the C tier for me. Up next, we have Opal. This is one of Su Yin's daughters, and the love interest for Bolin in the later seasons. And I think she's a decent character, but I don't really feel like she adds too much value outside of being another love interest for Bolin. I don't think that she's a great character, kind of just a bit annoying at sometimes, so don't really love Opal, only going to find herself in the D tier, unfortunately. Up next, we have Kai, who is kind of this runaway troublemaker kid who gets airbending in Season 3. And honestly, he is like the most stereotypical cookie cutter troubled runaway kid you could ever find. Like you see a ton of different movies. There's always like movies that have kids where they're like all trouble and they're runaways, they're causing mischief left and right. The main characters look away and he's off doing something bad. I mean, it's just so predictable, and honestly I think he adds some value to the show, but he's just way too predictable as a character, and he really doesn't do anything that I didn't expect. So Kai, unfortunately, gonna find himself down in the F tier. I just really thought he was way too predictable and just way too stereotypical as a mischief kid, so he'll find himself sadly in the F tier. Up next, we have Gazan. Honestly, a really cool character. I loved his bending style. Even as a bad guy, he didn't have a whole lot of speaking parts, but when he did talk, I thought it was pretty funny. And lava bending, you know, while I'm not exactly sure, you know, how realistic it is, because it's earth bending, but yet he can heat it up, so he's also kind of a firebender almost, so I was a little questionable about lava bending. I felt like that's something that maybe only the Avatar should be able to do, because, you know, I feel it should require earth bending and lava bending, and fire bending. But overall, still a really cool character. I thought he was a great villain. Gazan gonna find himself in a very solid B tier. Up next, we have Minghua, who I thought was another really cool character. You know, she has no arms, and yet she's still a waterbender. I think that's really cool. I think she's also a very cool villain. Not quite as funny as Gazan was, though, so I feel like in terms of that, I can't really put her in the same tier, but she'll still find herself in a very high C tier, I would say. And then we have Pli, who is the, basically, I don't know, daughter, granddaughter to Combustion Man from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Basically, she can shoot explosions through her head, and honestly, surprisingly, another character who we do actually see, like, definitively die. You know, she gets the, basically metal wrapped around her head as she's firing her explosion and, you know, evidently blows herself up. But overall, I would say she's an interesting character, but once again, kind of gonna find herself with Minghua in the C tier. Very high C tier, cool character, but doesn't have much speaking parts, doesn't really play a super important role outside of just being one of the bad guys in Season 3. And then the last bad guy in Season 3 is Zahir, who I think is really, really cool. I think he's a great villain, really, really interesting. I think he's really smart, and I just love the role that he plays in Season 3. Don't know how I feel about the airbending levitation thing, just being able to fly around whenever you want. It's kind of weird. But overall, Zahir, still a great, great villain, and for me, he is going to find himself up in the S tier as well. You know, not quite as good of a villain as Amon for me, but I do think he was fantastic. Up next, we have Prince Wu, who is the heir to the Earth Kingdom throne after the Earth Queen dies. And honestly, this guy, he's just kind of annoying. He's really annoying in early Season 4, and even at the end of Season 4, when he kind of becomes, you know, a bit more developed, I still don't think he's a great character, and he's going to find himself in a very low D tier. He would be F tier, but he does have a little bit of a redemption arc towards the end of Season 4. Up next, we have Kuvira, who is the villain from Season 4. Now, I didn't absolutely love Season 4. I felt like it was a bit rushed, and, you know, knowing some of the production issues, of course, I'm going to cut them some slack, but I do think that Kuvira was a pretty good villain, all things considered. But overall, you know, not my favorite character. I feel like she was a good villain, but not a great villain. And again, I think that's kind of due to the fact that Season 4 was so rushed. So Kuvira, good, not great. Only going to find herself at a C tier. And then up next, we have Patar, who is basically the love interest of Kuvira, and another one of the sons of Su Yin. And I would say he's an interesting character. I kind of forgot that we even met him in, I think it was Season 3, maybe Season 2. But he makes a pretty important role in Season 4. But I just don't feel like he adds that much value, and honestly, I think if he just wasn't even in the Season 4 at all, I think it would have been just as good. So in terms of adding value, not a whole lot for Patar. Gonna find himself in the D tier as well. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed.